March 3, 1943. The night over Germany was alive with sound. It began as a faint vibration, a soft pulse that seemed to come from the stars themselves. German sentries along the Elbe River turned their faces upward, trying to locate it. Within minutes, the hum grew into a trembling roar, and those who had heard it before felt the same sinking feeling in their stomachs. They knew what was coming. In the control room of Fliegerhorst Stade, a radar operator leaned close to his glowing green screen. Faint blips appeared, large and slow-moving. "They're too big for Wellingtons," he muttered. "Too many engines for Halifaxes. What are they?" His commander didn't answer. He knew. "Lancasters," he said quietly. "Again." Far above, at 20,000 feet, a formation of Royal Air Force bombers crossed the black North Sea in perfect silence, except for the deep thrum of their engines. Flight Lieutenant William "Billy" Harris sat in the cockpit of Lancaster S for Sugar, staring into the endless dark. The cabin was cramped, filled with the mechanical smell of oil and sweat. Frost coated the inside of the canopy. He tapped his gloved fingers against the throttle. "Steady, lads. Target's Hamburg. Flak expected. Heavy." In the rear turret, Sergeant George "Mick" Daniels grinned over the intercom. "Same as always, then," Billy smiled. These missions were becoming routine, if such a word could apply to flying straight into hell. The Lancaster wasn't a beautiful plane. Its shape was all function. Broad wings, a long fuselage, and a thick belly designed to carry the heaviest bomb load of any aircraft in the war. German crews joked about it, calling it das fliegende Scheune, the flying barn. But Billy didn't mind. Barns were strong, steady, and dependable. This machine, ugly or not, always brought them home. As they neared the German coast, the pilot switched to oxygen. His breath turned shallow through the mask. "Navigator, course check." "On target," came the reply. "Wind shifted northwest, minimal drift." Billy nodded, scanning the black horizon. Faint lights shimmered far below, the first glimpse of Hamburg. Inside the German city, anti-aircraft gunners scrambled to their posts. Sirens wailed across rooftops. Families fled into basements as searchlights swept the sky. Oberfeldwebel Hans Schmidt of Nachjagdgeschwader 1, stationed near Lüneburg, raced toward his Bf-110 night fighter. His mechanic shouted, "Contacts approaching from the north! Big ones!" "I know what they are," Hans growled, climbing into the cockpit. He'd seen the Lancasters before, slow, lumbering giants that seemed to defy reason by staying airborne at all. Their size made them easy to spot, but killing them was another matter. The armor was thick, the gunners precise, and the engines refused to die. Hans lifted off into the cold night air. "Control, this is Raven 1. I have visual on the bombers. Altitude 20,000, heading south. Intercept and destroy," came the reply. He climbed higher, the city's glow illuminating the horizon in a dull orange haze. There they were, massive silhouettes gliding across the sky, so slow they seemed motionless. He dove from behind, opening fire. Green tracers cut through the darkness, ripping past the bomber's tail. Inside Billy's Lancaster, the tail gunner shouted, "Fighter, 6 o'clock!" Billy banked slightly, just enough for the gunner to get a clear shot. Daniel squeezed the triggers, his twin groundings flashing. Hans saw sparks explode across his canopy. One bullet shattered his windshield, another tore through his wing. He pulled away, cursing. The barn was shooting back. Minutes later, Hans landed safely, trembling. His mechanic rushed over. "Did you hit any?" He shook his head. "No, I hit one, but it didn't fall." His voice was quiet, almost respectful. Above the city, the bombers reached their mark. The sky erupted in flame. 1,000 tons of explosives rained down, tearing apart streets, factories, and docks. Billy held his course steady. Below, Hamburg burned like a furnace. The heat lit up the clouds, casting red light on the bombers' underbellies. The air shimmered with heat and smoke. "Bombs gone," the bombardier said calmly. "Right, lads, let's get out before they wake up down there," Billy replied. But getting out was never simple. Flak batteries opened fire, filling the sky with bursts of orange and black. Shrapnel clanged against the fuselage. Daniels cursed. "They're painting us good tonight." Billy didn't answer. He was too focused on keeping the aircraft steady. One wrong move, one panicked dive, and the wings could tear off. The Lancaster wasn't built for acrobatics. It was built to endure. One burst hit close enough to shake the entire aircraft. Warning lights flickered. The engineer checked the gauges. "Number 3 engine's running hot, Skipper." "Feather it if it gets worse," Billy said, voice steady. Inside, he wasn't calm at all. But he'd learned something from this aircraft. Strength wasn't about speed or grace. It was about holding your course, no matter what. After hours of tense silence, they crossed the Dutch coast, and the blackness of the sea returned beneath them. England was still another hour away, but the hardest part was over. Billy exhaled, his shoulders finally relaxing. "We'll live to see breakfast, lads," Daniels chuckled through static. "Aye, but I doubt the Jerry's gown there will." Back in Hamburg, the devastation was beyond belief. Entire districts were reduced to ash. Firefighters couldn't control the inferno. The heat melted streetcar rails and glass alike. Thousands died, and the Germans who survived spoke of the bombers with fear and a strange sort of awe. "They are barns," Hans told a fellow pilot the next morning, staring at the black smoke still rising from the city. "Big, slow barns that carry death in their bellies. You shoot at them, but they keep coming. They don't break apart. They just keep coming." By that spring, the Luftwaffe began to whisper the nickname with a mixture of mockery and respect. Fliegende Schweine. Some used it to laugh, others used it to pray. As the months passed, that sound, the heavy drone of 4 Merlin engines, became the soundtrack of German nights. When people heard it, they ran for the shelters without even waiting for the sirens. In May, Billy and his crew returned to Hamburg again. This time, German radar picked them up earlier, and night fighters were already in the air. As they approached, Daniels reported movement below. "Fighters coming up, Skip, at least 3. "Keep your eyes peeled," Billy said. Suddenly, tracers tore through the darkness. One engine burst into flames. Smoke filled the cabin. Billy's hands tightened on the yoke. "Hold her steady." The crew fought to keep the aircraft flying. The engineer cut fuel to the burning engine, and the flames subsided. They were losing altitude, but not control. A Bf-110 swept past their nose, missing them by yards. Daniels fired again, hitting its tail. The German fighter exploded in midair, debris scattering like sparks. Cheers erupted over the intercom. Billy grinned beneath his mask. "Still think barns can't bite?" They limped home on 3 engines. The landing was rough, but they made it. Ground crews ran out to greet them, clapping as the crippled Lancaster rolled to a stop. Its belly was scarred, one wing torn, but it had survived yet again. News of their return spread quickly across the base. The Lancaster's reputation grew with every mission. Ground crew swore the machine had a soul, that it refused to die as long as its crew stayed together. And in Germany, Hans and his comrades prepared for the next raid. The Luftwaffe tried new tactics, radar traps, upward-firing cannons, night vision scopes, but nothing seemed to stop the barns. They'd shoot one down, only to see 10 more appear. The British were relentless. They didn't fly like hunters. They flew like farmers sowing fields, methodically, steadily, filling the sky with destruction. By late summer of 1943, the Germans no longer laughed at the name. They said it quietly, grimly. When the sound began in the distance, mothers shook their children awake. Soldiers looked toward the horizon. and in every airfield across the Reich, young German pilots climbed into their cockpits, knowing that tonight, somewhere above the clouds, the flying barns were coming. They didn't just bring bombs, they brought the reminder that Britain was still in the fight, that even as cities burned, the spirit of resistance refused to fade. And as for Billy Harris and his crew, they would soon be assigned a new mission, one that would test the very limits of courage and the endurance of those flying barns. The Germans had learned to fear them, but they hadn't yet seen what those lumbering giants could truly do. Because somewhere in England, engineers were already working on something new, a weapon so massive it would turn those barns into legends. The night over Hamburg faded into history, but its echo remained, the deep, steady heartbeat of the Lancaster's engines, rolling across the dark like thunder over the sea. May 16, 1943. The rain had stopped over Lincolnshire. Dawn was still hours away, but the airfield at Scampton was alive with movement. Floodlights glowed dimly through the mist as mechanics made final checks. Inside the briefing hut, Squadron Leader Guy Gibson stood before a wall map of Germany, his voice calm but electric. "Tonight," he said, "we'll strike at the heart of their industry, and we'll do it in a way they'll never expect." Around him sat young men, pilots, navigators, gunners, all barely in their 20s. They'd flown the Lancaster for months now, each one knowing what it could do. But tonight's mission was different. The target wasn't a city, it was the Ruhr Dams, the steel heart of Nazi Germany. Gibson turned to reveal a small black sphere resting on the table beside him. "This," he said, "is the weapon. It's called the bouncing bomb." The room fell silent. Most of them had heard rumors, but now it was real. A weapon that skipped across water, struck a dam, and detonated underwater, magnifying the blast tenfold. It sounded mad, but so had the idea of flying a barn through hell and back, and that had worked. As darkness fell, 19 Lancasters lined up on the runway. Each one carried a single bouncing bomb, slung beneath its belly like an iron heart. Engines roared to life, the ground shook. One by one, the flying barns lifted off into the night. From the cockpit of his Lancaster, Gibson looked at the faint line of the English coast fading behind him. Ahead lay 600 miles of enemy territory, valleys, rivers, and flat guns. "Steady now," he told his crew. "Keep her low." They flew at treetop height, sometimes just 60 feet above the ground. The Lancaster wasn't designed for that, but it obeyed, lumbering through valleys and over forests like a beast that refused to quit. Below, German towns were quiet. No sirens, no searchlights. No one expected bombers to fly this low. By midnight, they reached the first target, the Murna Dam. The moon glimmered on the calm surface of the reservoir. Gibson's voice crackled over the radio. "Attack runs. Line up." One by one, the Lancasters swooped in, engines screaming, floodlights illuminating the water. Gibson went first. "Steady, steady, release." The bomb spun beneath the plane, skipped 3 times across the surface, and struck the dam wall. A flash, a roar, water erupted like a volcano. The dam cracked, but held. Another bomber came in, then another. The German gunners had recovered now, tracers filling the air. Flak exploded above the water. One bomber took a direct hit and vanished in a burst of fire. Finally, Flight Lieutenant Dave Shannon lined up his run. "Release!" The bomb struck, sank, and detonated. The wall of the Murna Dam split open like a wound. Millions of tons of water surged through, tearing the valley apart. Hours later, German towns downstream were engulfed, factories drowned, power plants failed, and in Berlin, the high command woke to chaos. Albert Speer, the Reich's chief architect, stared at the photographs and muttered, "It's a catastrophe." The Germans had seen many raids before, but nothing like this. The barns had found a new kind of weapon, and worse, they had flown in a way that defied every rule. The Luftwaffe pilots who heard about it were stunned. How do you fight something that can fly under radar, skip bombs like stones, and return home untouched? One said bitterly. For weeks, German engineers worked day and night to repair the dams, but the psychological damage was done. The barns were no longer a joke, they were symbols of impossible determination. By late 1943, the bombing campaign turned toward Berlin. For the Lancaster crews, it was the most dangerous mission imaginable. Berlin's defenses were a fortress, flak towers, searchlights, and hundreds of night fighters. But the orders were clear: burn the capital. November 22, 1943. Billy Harris was still flying with the same crew, though they looked older now. Haunted eyes, pale faces. Each mission carved a little more out of them. The mess hall laughter was quieter, but when the call came, Berlin, none refused. That night, nearly 800 bombers took off. The sky above England was filled with red and green navigation lights, stretching as far as the eye could see. From below, it looked like an airborne armada. As they approached Berlin, the first flak bursts appeared. Black puffs surrounded them, glowing orange at the center. "They're awake," Daniels muttered from the rear turret. "Keep her steady," Billy said. The Lancaster shuddered as shrapnel pinged off its hull. "Navigator, time to target." 3 minutes. They broke through clouds, and there it was, Berlin, burning already from the first wave. The flames climbed thousands of feet, reflecting off the bombers' bellies like sunrise. Billy felt the heat even through the glass. "Bombs gone," his bombardier shouted. The aircraft lurched upward as the load released. Below, explosions rippled through the city.
A night fighter appeared suddenly on their right, a Ju-88. Tracers zipped past. Daniels swung the turret, returning fire. The German disappeared into smoke. Another attack came from above. Schrage music, upward-firing cannons. Rounds tore through their wing. "We're hit!" shouted the engineer. "Hold it together," Billy grunted, adjusting the trim. "Get us out!" The sky was chaos. Hundreds of barns flying through storms of fire, some burning, some disintegrating mid-air, others pressing forward like ghosts. The smell of smoke filled the cockpit. They made it out alive, barely. Behind them, Berlin burned for 3 days. In Germany, panic began to spread. Even propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels admitted privately that the British bombers were breaking the people's spirit. German night fighter aces called the Lancaster a monster. Its silhouette filled their gun sights night after night, but somehow it always returned. For the crews who fought against it, the fear became almost superstitious. "When you hear 4 engines together," one German pilot said, "you feel death coming closer. When there are hundreds, you feel the end of the world." By 1944, German engineers were trying to design interceptors fast enough to catch them. Me-262 jets, TA-154 night fighters, but it was too late. The barns ruled the night sky. Meanwhile, in England, Billy's crew received a new assignment. The biggest bomb ever made, the 12,000-pound tall boy. It was designed to pierce the earth or concrete before exploding, capable of destroying anything: bunkers, viaducts, even battleships. "They're turning our barn into a siege weapon," Daniels joked. "Aye, and we're the poor sods who have to deliver it." June 14, 1944. Their target, the viaduct at Saumur, France. A key rail line supplying German troops after D-Day. The mission was precise and risky. They'd fly low, hit the bridge dead center, and escape before the fighters found them. The Lancaster lumbered into the night once more, heavy with the tall boy bomb. It climbed slowly, engines groaning but never faltering. As they approached the target, the bombardier adjusted the sight. "Steady, steady!" The bomb dropped. Seconds later, a thunderous blast split the valley. The viaduct vanished in a cloud of dust and rock. Billy's crew cheered. Another impossible mission done. Another proof that the flying barn could carry anything, survive anything, and still come home. In Germany, reports of the tall boy attacks terrified the command. They can hit bridges, bunkers, even submarines, shouted one officer. They're not bombers anymore, they're siege engines. Hans Schmidt, now a major in a night fighter wing, listened silently. He'd been through it all: the Hamburg Inferno, the Dambusters, the Berlin raids. His hair was turning gray, his nerves frayed. When younger pilots mocked the British bombers, he silenced them. Laugh all you like, but when you hear them overhead, you will pray you never see their shadows. He'd once thought of them as barns, slow and harmless. Now he saw them for what they were: machines built for endurance, manned by crews who refused to surrender. That summer, the Allies' bombing campaign reached its peak. Entire cities lay in ruins. Production faltered. The Luftwaffe was exhausted. And still the barns came, night after night. Each time the sound arrived first, the deep, rolling thunder of Merlin engines echoing across the sky. German civilians learned to tell the difference between American fortresses and British barns. The fortresses came by day, fast and bright. The barns came by night, slow and endless. One brought fear, the other brought despair. By late 1944, Billy's logbook was full. 50 missions. His hair was grayer now, too, though he was barely 30. His crew was like family, bound by shared terror and faith in their aircraft. On their final mission, as they taxied down the runway, Daniels tapped the fuselage affectionately. "Bring us home one more time, old girl." The Lancaster lifted into the air, slow and majestic, engines steady as ever. Somewhere far ahead, Germany waited in darkness. And down below, Hans Schmidt sat in a bomb shelter, listening to the distant hum of engines. He closed his eyes and muttered, almost to himself, "The barns are coming again." He wasn't mocking anymore. He was remembering. February 14, 1945. The night skies over Germany looked like a living wound. Flames from burning cities painted the clouds orange, and in the distance, the sound of hundreds of aircraft engines merged into a single thunderous growl. Somewhere above that storm of fire and metal, the Avro Lancasters of RAF Bomber Command were on another raid, and the men in their bellies were holding on to faith, fear, and the hope that this might finally end the war. Inside one of those bombers, Flight Lieutenant Jack Henshaw sat behind the control yoke, eyes fixed on the instruments glowing dim green. The Lancaster shook violently from turbulence, and tracer rounds climbed toward them like angry fireflies. His co-pilot yelled over the intercom, "Flak ahead, dead center!" Jack pulled hard left, the big aircraft responding sluggishly, wings creaking under the strain. The crew knew the risk. Once a Lancaster got caught in a flak cone, there was almost no way out. But still they pressed forward, because that was the mission. That was what they did. Down below, in Dresden, thousands of anti-aircraft gunners were already aiming upward. The German radar crews had been tracking the bombers for over an hour. The operators whispered to each other, "Lancasters again." Even now, after years of war, the word carried dread. The flying barns had returned. They called it that because of its size, boxy, wide, almost ungainly, a flying barn stuffed with explosives. But to them, it wasn't just a nickname, it was a warning. If you saw a Lancaster overhead, it meant a storm was coming. As the first bombs dropped, the night was ripped apart. The shock wave rolled through the city, rattling windows miles away. Entire streets vanished in seconds. The German spotters, high in their towers, tried to mark targets, but smoke and fire blinded them. One man later wrote in his report, "The sky was burning from horizon to horizon. The flying barns came in waves, and we could do nothing."
By early 1945, German night fighter aces like Heinz Wolfgang Schnaufer had claimed hundreds of kills against bombers. Yet even he described the Lancaster as a monster that refused to die. He wrote that when you shot one down, another appeared, and another, as if the English were sending their ghosts to finish the job. Inside the bombers, survival meant everything. Crews developed rituals, lucky charms, small prayers, secret routines. Rear gunners often said they could smell danger before they saw it. The scent of cordite and frost mixing in the thin air. The cockpit glass would freeze from the inside, and each man's breath turned into a tiny cloud. The sound of engines became a rhythm they could feel in their bones, 4 Merlin engines hammering like a heartbeat. Sometimes they'd see another Lancaster beside them, flying so close that the wings almost touched, a silent companion in the dark. Then a burst of flak would appear, and that friend would vanish in a blink, swallowed by fire. The sky was full of ghosts, and every man knew he might become one before dawn. The Lancaster's legend wasn't built on its looks. It wasn't sleek or elegant. It was built on its endurance. It could take hits that would destroy any other bomber. Crews returned home with holes big enough to crawl through, rudders missing, engines shredded, yet somehow still flying. Ground crews used to joke that the Lancaster didn't need wings to come home. It just needed the will. By the end of the war, over 7,300 Lancasters had been built. More than half were lost in combat. 55,000 airmen of Bomber Command never came back. But those who did became part of something larger, a story that even the enemy respected. When the war ended and Germany lay in ruins, many Luftwaffe officers were interviewed by Allied intelligence. Again and again, one name came up: Lancaster. One German officer said, "We called it the Flying Barn because it looked slow, heavy, and awkward. But we learned that barns burn, and this one brought the fire to us." In the years that followed, the world tried to move on. Cities rebuilt. The factories that once made bombers now made airliners. But in the hangars of old air bases across England, a few Lancasters remained. Some were scrapped. Others, like the one nicknamed Just Jane, were preserved. Veterans would come to see them, running their hands along the cold metal skin, remembering the friends who never returned. Every scratch, every dent told a story. A mission survived. A night when the sky almost didn't let them go home. Today, when one of the last airworthy Lancasters takes off, the sound is unmistakable. That deep, rolling thunder of 4 Merlin engines echoes across fields and towns, and for a moment, time folds back. People stop what they're doing, look up, and listen. It's no longer a weapon, but a memory made of steel and sound. To the Germans who fought beneath it, it will always be der fliegende Stadel, the flying barn. To the men who flew it, it was more than a machine. It was their guardian, their coffin, their way home. And to history, it remains a contradiction, ugly yet beautiful, heavy yet graceful, feared yet admired. The bomber that didn't just carry bombs, but carried the weight of a generation's courage. When you hear its engines, you don't just hear power. You hear the ghosts of the men who dared to fly through hell and made it back. Because even the enemy, those who watched from the ground or from the cockpits of night fighters, admitted one thing: the Lancaster wasn't just a bomber. It was a promise. A promise that no matter how dark the night became, the light would always find a way through. And in that light, in that thunder rolling across the skies of Europe, the legend of the flying barn still lives.